I've always been a spiritual Alfred.
Hey, thank you for joining the Escape With Me Book Club. Escape with me, Sam Reiner.
And me, Tim Bergman.
Into our most recent read. Come with us as we evade reality and go into detail about a new book. We'll be covering the book from beginning to end, so there will be spoilers. Today we're going to the countryside of Hampshire. I hope I pronounced that correct, who knows, in southern England. Published November 1972, Watership Down is the tale of a herd of rabbits. That is what a group of rabbits is called. It is a herd.
I thought it'd be something more clever.
Yeah, I thought it'd be something a little cuter, but I don't make the rules. Whoever picked the grouping chose a grouping of ravens to be called a murder. Was like, okay, I've run out of clever ideas. Everything else is a herd, a collection.
Well, imagine a group of rabbits being called a murder.
Well, I mean, in this book, they are.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Goodness.
Seeking safety and the adventures they go on to start their own warren. Originally conceived as stories to tell his children in the car, does this book hold up over 50 years later? Or has Hazel found the length of his influence? So, this is a you pick. I have never heard of this book before. I checked it out over the library, and my husband was immediately like, I need to read that book. He hasn't read it. I've officially read it before him, so I feel special. Where in the world have you heard this book? I brought it to work. My coworker is like, that is my favorite book ever. And I'm surrounded by people that have known that this book exists. But you are the first one to ever bring it to my attention.
Right. So I remember reading this maybe late high school, early college. And I had known about it before then because my sister introduced it to me. But I thought it was a book about naval warfare. So that's why I avoided it for so long. Because in my mind, Watership Down was, just put the three words separately instead of together.
Yeah, it is two words, Watership and down.
Yep. So I separated it out. It was water. Oh, that goes with ships. Yeah, water, ship, down. Okay, so it's sinking. And I didn't know it was about rabbits until I was told it was about rabbits.
Yeah, the name definitely does not give it away.
Yeah.
So why did you pick this? This is your first book. You had a lot of options. We talked about several books, but this was the one you were like, you know what? This one.
Yeah. So I remember reading this book for the first time and absolutely loving it. It was everything that I wanted a book to be, aside from it being rabbits. But that was part of the fun too. But it is an epic. And I mean that in the literal sense of this is a journey. This is a hero's journey with his tribe, founding a new country, a new warren. It is an Aeneid.
It is accurate. So yeah, I'm kind of curious. So you obviously love the book. So why did you pick it for your first book?
I wanted something that you could say that this is an easy read. You could say that this has a lot less deeper themes that you have to really dive into, dig into. But really, I did want to read this book again. It had been too long since I'd read it last. And going into it again, it is a lot more deep than I remember it being. Now that I've actually gained some world experience and all that, it's interesting to see how things have changed.
Oh, yeah, because I would argue it does have deep themes and such, and literature with a capital L.
Uh-huh.
So it definitely does. To get into this is a children's book, but know your child. Maybe read it yourself before you give it to your child, because if I had read this as a child, I would have been devastated by all the bunny murder.
Yep.
For whatever reason, in fourth grade, I could have read The Series of Unfortunate Events, but I could not have read this one. My favorite book was Hatchet, could not have read this one. So I would definitely say know your child, because we do have somewhat of a content warning. Death of an animal. That's what would have gotten me. I would have been done.
Yeah.
I never want to see this book ever again. The cartoon is demented. I would recommend reading the book over watching the cartoon.
Did you watch the cartoon?
I did not, but I've seen snippets.
They don't hold back on that.
Going from an auditory medium, because I do consider books auditory, because when you read them to yourself.
Yeah, in your head.
In your head, you make it up yourself, versus a visual media. Because you can say, Fiver has a feeling that something bad is going to happen, but you can't just, you could just say that in a movie, but that's boring. So they have to show you that Fiver's having a bad feeling, and then you get blood across the fields, and the shadows growing into monsters.
It's called a vision for a reason,
Oh my gosh. So there is death of animals. There is blood. There is gore. I would argue that there is a rape implied, though I think it would definitely go over bunnies' heads. Bunnies. Kids. It would go over bunnies' heads too. It would go over kids' heads.
There's even implied cannibalism at one point.
That is true. There is implied cannibalism. They talk about infertility, and there is graphic violence. So all the stuff to consider, all the child versions of all of those things, but know your kid before you give it to him. I would equate this, because I've talked to my husband about this, I would read this to my child around the time that I felt that they were emotionally ready for Wizard of Oz and those books. I think they're about on par. If he can handle monsters throwing their own heads at you, probably can handle some bunnies kicking each other.
You know, I gotta say, that first car ride where he invented this book must have been something else.
I have so many questions about that, but how did you remember these? Anyway, judge a book by its cover. The cover I had was from the library, was just a field, a beautiful green field with a fence and blue sky and a little brown rabbit on it. The Goodreads cover has a big brown rabbit on it, which takes up most of it in the sun setting. And so I thought going into this, and especially since it starts off and he's like, oh, I wrote this for my kids. I thought this was going to be kind of like Peter Rabbit.
You thought.
Yes. Which, by the way, was one of my favorite books growing up. I adore Peter Rabbit. So yes, but no. It is funny shenanigans, but it's, I don't know, Peter Rabbit gets pretty tense too, but not as long. This is definitely a longer book with more things that happen.
I had definitely forgotten how long this book was. I was expecting something around 200 to 300 pages. The Goodreads version is the one with a prominent rabbit on the cover, is around 450 something pages.
It is long. It's broken into 5 sections, and the chapters themselves, for the most part, are pretty short, 3 to 4 pages. Some of them are longer than others, especially when you get into any of the stories about the rabbit gods. Those are definitely longer. But for the most part, if your kid to lay down and read a couple snippets, a couple chapters, then I think it's fine. But it is an epic. We mean it. It's a lot. So many bunnies. One of my friends reviewed it already. They only gave it 3 stars, which I'm like, what is wrong with you? But they were like, I didn't know you could write so many stories about rabbits. And I agree. I think they're all good, but I'm just so impressed. How many road trips did you go on for this?
Yep, and then he followed it up later in 1992 with Tales from Watership Down.
There is a second book. It is confirmed. And as you have confirmed to me, there is a tabletop role-playing manual.
Bunnies and Burrows, was it?
For this. There is a cartoon, and I think there was something else that I saw. And I was like, oh, I need to tell Tim. I don't remember what it was. It might have been a video game. The love for this book is deep.
It has albums, it has role-playing games, all of that kind of deal.
It does, and I'm very impressed. It reminds me kind of that Midlet series, Warriors, about cats that make clans and fight each other.
There was one about owls, too, wasn't there? It had a movie.
Owls, there was ones about dogs. Well, this is the rabbit one, the precursor. I would not be surprised if the author of Warriors read this as a child and was like, I could do that, but cats.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. So there are 2 things to start with. Talking about the style of the book. I liked, in the beginning, there were these really cute rabbit culture footnotes. Adorable. I love them. They were so cute. The thing that got annoying was that every single chapter has a quote header. And at first it's fun. You're like, yeah, whatever. But there are like 120 chapters. And sometimes they were spoilers, sometimes they weren't. It just got to the point where I was just like, you had to put so much effort into finding all of these quotes. I think I read them all still. I thought about not, but I think for completion edition, I read them all. And I just don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if that was needed.
Yep, I will tell you something. I loved that. I loved all of the quotes that he did there. I love the sources that he put in there because it's kind of like, I don't know if meta commentary is the right word, but he quotes a book in there, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And that just shows to me that he knows that this was an epic book. He did all of the research to make this as close to all those classical sources as possible. So it's kind of this way of saying, I know that you put effort into this. He's reaching back into this dawn of human history, all of these epics and heroes, and making it small and fuzzy.
It's true. It's big. And the only reason I say it's kind of, because we would have, like I said, 3-page chapters. And so it was like, quote, 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 quote. And I'm like, for a first read, I'm a little tired.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. Back in 1972, there was no Google.
That's what I'm impressed with. I bet that took longer than writing this book.
And I think this was his first novel, too.
It's kind of nuts. So I was impressed, but I don't know if it paid off. Maybe it did. Maybe it found the right audience with you and other people, but I was just like, this is a choice.
Yep.
I've never seen any other book do that. I've seen books use quotes in the beginning of the book. I've seen books use quotes for like the parts, the different sections of the book, but I've never seen someone quote deep literature every single chapter.
I know I've read at least a few books like that, but they are few and far between, especially today.
Especially today. I cannot imagine a publisher putting up with it.
Which is odd because we do have Google now, and we can't just look up great quotes from, XYZ.
Maybe that's why. It's less of an impress at this point.
There's no bragging rights for using Google.
But we begin with adorable bunnies living adorable bunny lives until one of them was like, hey, the world is ending. Not really, but he has a very bad feeling. And Fiver never knows what his bad feelings mean necessarily. He does have visions later that are more specific, but in the beginning, he's just like, I have a bad feeling and we should leave like right now.
Yep.
And so you have Hazel and Fiver, and they go and talk to the big bunny honcho guy, Chief Rabbit.
Yeah, Lord Farah, I think.
Oh, I have no idea. Oof. The bunny. Okay, so the bunnies have 2 names. There's the bunny name in the language, and then their nicknames. And not everyone has both. Like, Bigwig is one of the characters, and he has both names.
Yeah, Thaley.
And Thaley means fur head, and then they call him Bigwig because he's the Bigwig and whatever. And Fiver has a rabbit name. Hazel doesn't have a rabbit name. He just gets to be called Hazel.
Yeah, a lot of the rabbits that have just names around plants don't have other names. But then you go to the Warren later on, and you have the does.
Yeah, all of the does have rabbit names.
And they're really complicated names, too.
The worst. Me trying to type those stupid names out even one time. Where is it? Okay, first of all, I want to say we have so many rabbits. I have more than 4 pages of names. Just names of rabbits, but
that is what rabbits are good at.
Here's one of them. It is spelled THETHUTHINNANG.
I'm not going to try and pronounce that.
I don't even know. My dyslexia is like, that's too many letters. That is too many consonants.
I did appreciate when he had footnotes describing how to pronounce the name.
I'm going to pronounce them wrong anyway. I appreciate the attempt, but it lost cause. For me, anyway. But yeah, that doe's name means movement of leaves. Okay. But yeah, a lot of the guys' names, I don't know. You take them seriously, but it is a little funny when it's like, oh, here's Bluebell and Silverweed and Nightshade. Nightshade's actually a pretty cool name because it's poisonous. But Butterbur and Ash, Boxwood.
Yeah.
Laurel, Clover.
And then Thuthuthanang, the doe.
The naming inconsistency? I don't even know. But it's a whole thing. One of them got named Thunder, and I'm really curious what that one did to get his name.
Maybe he stomps really hard.
I don't know. Fiver got his name because, okay, this was actually adorable. Everything above 4 is a fiver, because rabbits can't count that high. There were several times when they were like, oh, we have 4 people, and then in the little thing, the 10 rabbits.
I thought that was a wonderful little inclusion there.
That was so funny.
Because, this whole thing is making rabbits very human, but he does things to make them unhuman too.
Yes, and he does cite his source for that. He's very open that he used that one book on rabbit behavior to be like, okay, so how do we do this? But yeah, everything above 4 is 5. So he was the runt of a litter of 8. So they call him Fiver because everything above 4 is 5.
Yep. The word rare is everything 5 and above. And so he was little everything 5 and above.
Yes, that is how he got his name. So I have no idea what Thunder did to get their name. Yeah, but most of them have a plant name of some sort.
Which makes sense for rabbits.
Which makes a lot of sense. And some of them are easier than others. I have no idea what a moneywort looks like.
Yeah, this is a very natural book. He does have a lot of scenes where you would have to know what the flora and fauna look like.
I am honestly impressed because those parts weren't boring. I feel like if you wanted to get better at writing about nature and scenery and things around, because he doesn't just explain it to explain it, he creates these biomes and you have emotions and feelings about the places. I would study this book. He does such a good job. It's natural, it flows. It's not like you're just listing a bunch of stuff. It's very good. Highly recommend if you want to get better at that.
This whole book takes place within, 10-mile radius at most?
Yeah, there's a map.
It's a real place that he walked.
It is a real place, which is very funny because he's like, the farm that I mentioned at the very end is a real place, but these are fake people. Please do not bother. The kind people's there. They are made up. So this is all real. And I mean, that helps a little bit. You can literally go and describe all the stuff there. But this guy's flora and fauna nature is very impressive to me. I know none of the things. So I was so thoroughly impressed. I needed to look up half of them. Granted, not all of them are native to where I grew up, so of course I wouldn't know as well, but still, very impressed. I don't think I could have gone on a nature hike and pointed out that much here than he did, so that's very good.
And there is kind of an ecological eco-message to the book.
Oh yeah, because the whole point is Fiver has a bad feeling. Yeah, men are about to show up and destroy the wilderness of the area to make houses.
Yeah, and gas all of the rabbits.
And then, very sad, and use a tractor to till the land. So yeah, we find that out secondhand. Fiver and Hazel are like, well, we're gonna go no matter what. They get a small group of people and they go, they run, they leave. They're eventually able to come to this new place, and once they're there, other rabbits from the Warren show up and they explained what happened. Basically the next day, if not the day after. This takes place. The book itself, rabbits have no patience, which granted, fair. But I swear this book takes place in all of the things that happen in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, by the time they get to, let's see, what is the other Warren? Woundwort Warren? Ephrafa.
Ephrafa.
By the time they get there, it's maybe been a week or two. And then the book has this neat little time skip when Woundwort takes a month or 2 months to actually get ready for the siege.
Yeah. And so that kind of gets me every time. They recover very quickly, which makes sense. Can't not recover quickly. But they'll be like, oh, I am so injured. I need a rest. And then they like take a nap and then they're like, okay, let's go on another journey. And you're just like, whew.
They do only live 2 to 3 years. So time is of the essence.
They'll come up with a plan and they'll be like, let's go to Ephrafa. And they'll spend 2 days planning. And that is a long time for plans for them. Usually they just do the thing and see how it works out. And so they spent 2 days planning it. And then like, okay, we're leaving tomorrow. We're not going to tell anyone the plan. We're just going to go. 3 of us know the plan and hopefully we can work it out. They definitely have a by the gods approach, which is fair. They're rabbits.
Yep. One thing I did find interesting is that in all of their journeys, rabbits are not made for long distance travel.
They're not. That was a long distance for them, for sure.
They're made for sprinting and short little hops. So actually going long distance, you'll never see a rabbit go a mile. You'll see maybe go 100 yards.
Yeah, they're always near their hole and hiding. Yes. So it is a lot. They learn they sort of learn what a boat is.
Thanks to the rabbit Blackberry, who is their resident genius.
And what's funny is they see it work and Hazel's still like, I don't know what happened. I don't know how you did that.
It's like an alien technology and Blackberry is the only one that's figured it out.
And so they do it again later and Hazel has has to be reminded. He's like, you did something with the thing where they could float. And it's like, oh my gosh. But I do like, we have a pretty solid crew. So we have Hazel, who kind of ends up being the leader by default. Everyone just keeps expecting him to make decisions. And so he just becomes this leader, which is very cute. I like that. He is a leader of people versus General What's-His-Face, who was like, I'm taking over now.
Yep. I was really surprised that there wasn't more of a conflict between him and Bigwig for the leadership. But it became this real loyalty thing where Bigwig just stepped aside and said, you're the boss.
Yeah. Something happened, and I can't remember exactly what, but there was definitely in the beginning, there was kind of tension. Who's going to be leader here?
I think it was Cowslip's Warren when he got caught in that snare, right?
Yeah, that definitely. When he saved Bigwig from the wire getting stuck in a trap, that was for sure. I'm thinking it was a little bit before that when he's like, oh, tomorrow we will find a place to rest. And they end up finding a place to rest, which is not a great place, but we'll get there.
Yep.
We'll talk about all the fun things. But yeah, so Bigwig was the, oh gosh. Rabbits have what is known as an
Owsla?
Is that real? Is that how it's pronounced?
I have no idea.
Oh dear.
We should have watched the cartoon to learn all the pronunciations.
Most of my co-stars do audiobooks. And so I'm so used to being like, so how do you pronounce this? But anytime we both read a fantasy book physically, we're both like, oh, I hope this is right. Yours sounds better. I kept calling it an Osla. But yours sounds better. So we're going to go with yours. Anyway, they're basically the police force of the Warrens. And so Bigwig was part of that. He wasn't the main guy, but he was there the day that Hazel and Fiver went to the Chief Rabbit. And the Chief Rabbit was like, nah, man, it's fine. And Bigwig followed them and was like, I'll go with you. So we have Bigwig. He's the muscle. He's the big dude. He, like you said, kind of tussles for leadership a little bit. Not really. But then you have Dandelion, who is the storyteller and very fast. No, that's Speedwell. Speedwell's fast. They all kind of have their own little thing. And then Blackberry's the smart one.
Yep, Blackberry's the one that came up with the boat, and he's the one that comes up with most of the plans.
Yes, so he is very sneaky. Pipkin is a friend of Fiver.
I love Pipkin. Pipkin's my favorite character.
Pipkin is pretty adorable. He's like Fiver, but without the visions.
He's just this little runt of a rabbit that sees Hazel as like an idol because he's rescued him so much and he's the leader. And so he kind of girds his courage up when he needs to. He's
very, very sweet and very loyal to Hazel because Hazel is loyal to him when they're traveling. He's like, we're not leaving you behind, Pipkin. And it's very cute. Then you have Captain Holly, who was the captain of the rabbit force. And he comes in and explains what's happened. So he's kind of like muscle like Bigwig is.
The chief of police coming.
Yeah, I would argue a little bit more disciplined, a little bit more natural of a leader. Though by the end, Bigwig figures it out.
And then kind of an assorted other cast.
Yeah, none of them super stand out to me. I remember Silver also being kind of a muscles.
Yeah, Silver is Bigwig's second.
Yeah.
He is the nephew of the old chief.
Yes. And so they thought that was going to be a big deal, and then it ends up not being a big deal at all.
Yep, and then you have just rabbits that are named but don't really get much time, like Hawkbit and Acorn.
Yeah. The biggest thing that happens with Hawkbit is that he complains that they've traveled too far. And then that makes Hazel go, well, we're going to find a place to rest tomorrow. And then they find a place to rest. And Hawkbit is like, I will never doubt you ever again. And that's kind of his important. He gets mentioned in group scenes and stuff. He's there. He's doing stuff.
Yeah, he's a C character.
Yeah, he has a episode in the anime and then just in the background.
Yeah, but there's also Bluebell. We mentioned him earlier. Bluebell is the jester character.
So Bluebell comes with Holly, and Bluebell's the comedian. He's the dad jokes. He's the, I'm going to make light of the situation.
Even when he doesn't need to.
It kind of rubs Hazel the wrong way, but Holly's like, no, we need his levity and all the terribleness that has happened. Throughout the book, I don't think Hazel and Bluebell ever become best of friends, but they find the good of each other a little bit. But yes, Bluebell shows up, and it kind of makes light of it so everyone can a little bit calm the heck down.
He does have a scene during the siege that I felt was pretty great. We may talk about that later.
Yes. So they escape from theirs, and like I said, we find out what happens later, which is very unfortunate. Holly, Bluebell. Yeah, it's Holly and Bluebell. They're the only ones who make it. There were other rabbits that began with them, but they did not make it.
The third got nicked at Cowslip's Warren. They just straight up attacked him.
Yeah, I was a little surprised. You get introduced to him, Toadflax. Hazel and Fiver find a flower that they want to eat, and then Toadflax shows up. It's like, I'm part of the military, so I'm more important than you, and eats it. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll remember your name. And then he just ends up getting murdered when he tries to go to the Warren. I was like, oh, I thought you were going to be a much bigger rabbit, but you were not.
Your punishment is an off-screen death.
Just a little bit. So they go through the woods, they run away from a dog. All this happens. They have to cross a river, but Fiver and Pipkin aren't strong, so Blackberry invents a boat.
Yeah, just straight up invents a boat.
Yes.
Rabbits do not understand how floating works. They have no concept of physics.
They do not. That is true. If you try to bring a rabbit to physics class, it's not going to do well, and it might get laughed at.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And so Blackberry is the first rabbit to realize that a piece of wood floats.
And you can float on it.
Yeah. And so he has Bigwig move the wood in the water as Pipkin and Fiver are sitting on top of to the other side.
And everyone is mystified. They go along with it, but they are mystified by how this has happened. And even though Hazel has seen it happen, he does not have the mentality to process what just happened. So he just ends up being like, well, that was weird. Anyway, it worked.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you managed to float your way to work tomorrow and then just forgot about it.
A little bit. He does forget about it pretty quickly. It's like, I don't understand how that happened. Moving on.
If it works, it works.
If it works, it works.
They are creatures of practicality.
Clearly. And momentary, like of the moment. They don't have long memories for sure. So they're going along. Eventually they do come to Watership Down. But we get a creepy little side thing where they come to this rabbit utopia.
Yeah, like rabbits of the corn gold.
Literally, I told my husband, I turned to him and I'm like, I think that we just met rabbit cannibals. If these were about humans, they would be cannibals. But they're herbivores, so they can't be doing the murdering. So I was sketched out this entire time. If they were omnivores or carnivores, they would have been cannibals. But no, they don't do the killing.
Yeah, it's very lotus eaters.
It's creepy as all get out. Okay, so what ended up happening? You come to find out after some really creepy, because everyone gets there, they're so happy. Like, oh, you just need to go to this one area and you can get all the food you want. They have really good holes in the ground. One good thing that comes out of it is they have this big hole where everyone can be down there together, and they're like, we should do that again. And so they end up doing that. That's the only good thing that, oh, and Strawberry. Strawberry comes along after this.
Good old Strawberry.
I feel so bad for him.
You know, he pulled his weight at the end. I'm happy for him.
He did. I'm just a little sad of why he changed his mind. So meet a bunch of rabbits. None of them answer questions. Like, as soon as you ask a question with where, they change the subject.
Yeah, they don't like talking about rabbits that aren't there.
Or anything. If someone's like, where is? They're just like, oh, change subject.
Yeah, you get a whole bunch of clues in this that these rabbits are not normal, natural rabbits.
They create art and appreciate art. Their poetry is, first of all, depressing, but they don't like stories about the gods. They think, oh, they don't exist anymore, basically. Like, oh, those were good stories, but we don't believe in the gods, which is very weird to our little group of rabbits who very much do believe in them. So that's weird. Just a very, very strange thing.
Ominous atmosphere the whole time.
It's very creepy. But some of them are like, well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. And they're like, oh, they're weird, but it's fine. We're in a good place. And so you come to find out a nearby farmer, instead of wanting to keep rabbits, found the warren and was like, hey, what if I just fed them? And basically a little bit domesticated these rabbits, and then they'll keep running into my wires and they'll be enough for meat, skin, whatever the heck he's doing. He's not doing a lot of rabbits, so I'm assuming it's for the meat, not the fur. So he's basically trained them to go to the place, and then he keeps wire traps all over the place to grab rabbits. And the rabbits are like, well, we want to keep the food, but we don't want our people to die. So they accept in these strange random rabbits, don't tell them anything, and just kind of cross their fingers that they're the ones that are going to end up in the wire traps and not their people.
Yep. They understand that the farm owner isn't going to need all of the rabbits at once. He only sets traps at certain times.
Yes.
And so they know that if they sacrifice a few rabbits, then the rest will get to eat.
Yes. And so that's kind of what this is. It's weird that they just accept them all of a sudden. It's weird that they won't answer any questions, and they perform a lot of really weird things, which granted, I would also have the same amount of nihilism if I was living a uncertain life where I could die at any time.
It's kind of like playing Russian roulette every single day.
It really is, because Bigwig gets caught in one, and so our rabbits, I'm just going to call them our rabbits because we hang out with them the most. Our rabbits freak out and they work together and they manage to get Bigwig out of the trap, which is one thing I will say. None of our rabbits die. Other rabbits die. Ours will get attacked. They will get injured. They will seem to have near-death experiences, like in this case, but they all survive. I was a little surprised of that.
This is a Bigwig turning moment, too, because if I remember right, this was right after he argued with Fiver, because Fiver was having visions of this place and saying, we need to leave here now.
This is blood. The roots are bones. The roots above the thing are bones, which is a very, very creepy thing to say, Fiver, but he was right. So this whole time, like I said, you're having this children of the corn, bunnies of the corn vibes, and then Fiver going, this place is death, the ceiling is bones. And then you have everyone else that are like, but we get to eat dough. Oh my gosh, someone's going to die. And someone does end up dying. They manage to free Bigwig, but Strawberry, who is of this ilk, ends up losing their dough that they have bonded with, because bunnies can mate singularly, monogamous and stuff. So that was his bunny wife, and she ends up dying by getting caught in one of the wire traps. And so he's like, I'm out of here. I can't live this life anymore. And so we get Strawberry.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Strawberry's just this middle-aged man that joins these guys on the road. You get these little snippets where it's like, yeah, Strawberry's a bit fatter than everyone else.
I mean, that is because he actually got to eat all that food. But I don't know. I like Strawberry. I'm glad he joined. But that is another example of it's important for the arc. I don't know what to do with you now that the arc is over, though, so you stand over there.
Yeah.
We'll see you in the background. That's another good example, but I like Strawberry.
We mentioned this. It does have a plethora of characters, and so Hazel, Fiver, and Bigwig are the big three, I think.
Yeah. Then you got your B rank, which I feel like is Blackberry and Dandelion, and Holly is also in the B. Speedwell, Silver. Silver might be C, but there's a lot of fight scenes, and so Silver pops up a lot more, so I go either way. Yeah, you can make a convincing argument for both. But yeah, I'd put Strawberry in the D category after his arc is over.
He does go with Holly to Ephrafa.
He does. That is true.
He doesn't go the second time, though.
No.
So yeah, I would say he's poor C tier Strawberry.
Yes. He gets ignored after, because like I said, 3 rabbits go, and so 3 rabbits come back, and so it's not like, oh my gosh, Strawberry went. And they make a bigger deal that, I think it was Holly. Holly went too, and so they make a big deal about that.
D tier. D tier would be the rabbits we meet from the hutch.
Yes. So they find Watership down, and they're like, cool, we're going to stay here. And Fiver's like, this is a place we could stay. And they're like, awesome. And then they look around, and they're like, wait a second. There's only dudes here. That's literally what I was thinking at one point. Like, halfway through the book, I'm like, are all of our characters guys? You're going to run into a problem here. And so they get to the water deep, and they start digging holes and whatever. And there's a little bit of random feminism in there where they're like, oh, bucks don't dig holes. And they're like, why not though? They're like, oh, that's women's work. So there's not any women here, and we need holes.
What's that test where a novel should have 2 characters?
Oh no, the Bachtel test? Let me try it.
This does not pass.
No, I don't think we even have 2 female characters talking to each other, period.
I think it shows them like in a little off-screen thing where it's like leaves in the breeze comforted the untranslatable name.
Bechtel, that's what it is. Where 2 female characters talk to each other about something not related to boys.
It kind of amazed me. This maybe after we do the summary we can touch on this, but this was a story for his little girls, and there was practically no girl character.
I know, that's why I'd argue, having been a little girl, I would argue this is not for little girls, because they would be very upset that the bunnies are getting hurt and murdered. This is how you create vegans.
And speaking of which, there is a little girl later in the novel, but we'll get to that.
There is a little girl that takes pity on the little rabbits. Oh my gosh. So they escape from from the not cannibals, but kind of cannibals. I stand by it. If they were humans, they would have been cannibals.
Yeah, if you take cannibalism as a wider term for using something up, then yeah, they were cannibalizing their own.
They were, and they were definitely letting it happen.
Yep. And so they get to Watership Down.
Yeah, and they don't have any women. Well, does, sorry. It's bucks and does, which, by the way, herd of deer, herd of rabbit, bucks, does. Whoever was in charge of this just copy-pasted, and no one said anything. So there are a bunch of bucks and no does. So they end up making the holes themselves. This is why Strawberry is important. Strawberry becomes a B character for a little bit because he's like the architecture guy to be like, oh, this is how we did it. And so he helps with that and it works out. Good for them, guys. But they're like, well, we need some girls. And so they kind of stuck on it when Hazel is nice to a field mouse and he gets this idea. He's like, wait a second. What if we made other animal friends? And all the rabbits are like, but why don't? And he's like, just trust me. I have a plan. If you can possibly be nice to a bird, be nice to a bird. And everyone's like, okay then. And wouldn't you know it, the next day, this is my favorite character.
I love his accent.
I love a lot of these. I love Fiver. I love Hazel. I love a lot of the rabbits. Dandelion. But how do you top our little black-headed gull? Also something I needed to look up.
Isn't he a kestrel? Or no, the kestrels are the one that tried to attack them earlier.
Yes. So he is called Kihar. He is a gull, a black-headed gull. And they make him seem so big in the book. And yes, they are. But, you know, compared to rabbits, not as big as I thought he was. I thought he was like those big birds with the red on top of their heads. And they're really, really, really big. But no, he's just a gull. He's just a gull. But he is so much fun. I love him. I am fine with putting up with his accent and taking twice as long to read his dialogue to figure out what the heck he's saying.
He does provide a much needed pause in some of the more action parts. You have to slow down and read his dialogue.
And he's just a good time. Like, he gets hurt, and the rabbits are like, hey, we can help you. And he's like, if you guys double cross me, I will peck you to death. And they were like, noted, fair. And so they end up helping him, get him out of the area, give him a place to rest, help feed him, because he got attacked by a cat. And so the injury he sustained definitely would have killed him otherwise, because in nature, you're not allowed to get injured. Otherwise, you die. Once again, they're not acting like rabbits, but by helping the kestrel, he's like, hey, I owe you one, basically. And so Hazel's like, hey. He mentions the big water, which they don't understand what the big water is, fair. But he's like, oh, I want to go to the big water for mating season. But he's worried that he's already too late and whatever. And they're like, hey, you know that thing you're feeling? We also feel that. We also need does. And he's like, oh, you want mothers?
Yeah, mutters.
Mutters. We need to save the mutters. It was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of adorable. But he scouts out the area to find a warren that has a lot of does. So they can go there and be like, hey, we'll take some of your does so you don't have overpopulation. Cool, bye. I don't know rabbit politics. Granted, they don't know rabbit politics either, arguably, but they make it seem like that's a total rational thing that would totally happen. Just walk up and be like, hey, we'll take some of your ladies off your hands. Bye. And they just go on their way.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like a thing. If a warren is overcrowded, then it could lead to all those nasty things of getting discovered and
overpopulation, because they find a place that absolutely is overpopulated. And so what ends up happening is when they tried to mate, the does sense the scarcity of resources and they end up
absorbing their own children.
Reabsorbing their children, which is something that happens in nature. Fun fact, it happens with lionesses too. They can also reabsorb their children. There's a lot of species that can reabsorb children, which is like a whole different science biology talk. But so that's been happening. And so they're getting upset because they want to have children. They're rabbits, for Pete's sake. That is the most cliche thing you could say about a rabbit, is they want to have children. And so they're getting very frustrated. But we meet this woundwort. He terrifies me.
He might be one of my favorite villains. And what he does with him in the epilogue is fantastic too.
I do like the epilogue of him. That is for sure. And there are definitely redeeming qualities of him because, you know, Americans, as long as you do something good, will like you, even if you're a terrible person. But he frightens me. You get his backstory and I'm just like, I feel bad for you. His backstory is his dad got caught and then they got caught. So both of his parents died in front of him and he managed to get away and whatever. And so he has taken that to super villain levels of this will never happen again. And he's created a dictatorship of rabbits. He even invented the secret police. That's not very secret because you know who it is. But basically, he didn't have enough power having a military. We also need the secret police.
Yep. And the thing about it is when the author was born in the 1920s, he lived through all of the big dictators of the day. So by the time he was in his 50s when he wrote this, he'd been through all the big ones of Europe. He's been through the revolutions and all that.
World War I and II. World War II, specifically, the fanaticism.
And so there's a quote near the end, once Woundwort is already, on the down, nobody can find him, but he's definitely been defeated at some point. And so one of the rabbits that was captured and then recuperated goes, I know we paid for it, but it was worth it. To feel for the first time ever, rabbits didn't go scurrying. The enemies feared us, and that was on account of him.
True.
And so the whole feeling of, yes, it was bad, but people were afraid of us. That is a very tyrannical feeling that a lot of people are willing to put up with.
Oh, yeah. And absolutely, that is definitely some of the propaganda used in World War II and others.
Yep. And this is after he's defeated. So he's not worrying about Woundwort coming to get him. He's saying perfectly honestly, I liked having this dictator around.
I liked being the one in charge and not the one being told what to do and whatnot. And I like to look at the Goodreads reviews because some people are very clever, far more clever than I am on Goodreads. But there was somebody on there and he was like, he says this was written for children and has no political whatever, not political, but basically this isn't based on something really obvious. Because there are books where it's like, okay, like Animal Farm, I think we know what you're talking about very clearly. But I read this book and I was like, so I understand why that commenter felt like that, but at the same time, I also see how the author was just like, I just created a generic dictatorship. And wouldn't you know it kind of lines up with several parts of history. So you could definitely try to draw parallels between it and other places very easily. But I also totally believe that the author was like, I didn't have anything specific in mind. I just wrote it how I felt it was. And it'd still be something you can totally relate to. Because like you said, he grew up through all that. So firsthand experience, well, not firsthand experience, he's British, but
he probably lived through the bombings and all that, goodness. But I drew us off topic a little bit. We just got to Woundwort and his mega warren of Ephrafa.
They send a group, we mentioned earlier, Holly, Strawberry, and I don't remember the other person at this point. And they go and they're just supposed to be like, hey, you got a lot of ladies here. We can take a couple off your hands. Cool, we're gonna leave. Bye. And while they're doing that, you mentioned the farm. Hazel is like, hey, Speedwell, we should totally spring the farm rabbits.
Yeah, there's several rabbits in just a little rabbit hutch, domesticated rabbits.
Which, oh, it's a bad idea. But he goes, he talks to them, he's like, hey, I'm going to free you tomorrow. And they're like, awesome. And so they go back to this farm, which is near Watership Down, but not so close, kind of close. And they go back, they spring them out. They end up only being able to spring out 3 out of the 4 of them. Hazel gets injured because he got shot. So Fiver was like, hey, I'm okay with everyone going on this trip, but you. Basically, something bad's gonna happen if you go. And he's like, okay, fine, I won't go in the farm, I'll only go so far and then they'll meet up with me, it'll be fine. And Fiver's like, I mean, okay.
Yeah, put another tally on the Fiver was right for it.
For real though, there are so many times where they get so fed up and he's just 100% correct. And then even Fiver calls him out, he's like, you're doing this for your vanity, not for actually whatever. And he's like, absolutely not, but absolutely for his vanity. They're already paired up. I mean, they could give you some kits. I think they were kittens. We can get some kittens out of them, but that does not solve the problem that you have a lot of dudes and no ladies.
Yep. And the whole thing, there's 2 bits of classical literature I'd like to bring up. The first is ambassadors being mistreated.
Yes.
Ambassadors were the sacred thing and probably still are in modern world. where you cannot mistreat those who come in a peace overture. And that is the first thing that Woundwort does.
Oh, yeah. So, like we said, Hazel almost dies. He gets shot. He crawls into a pipe, isn't even able to get back out. Fiver senses this, and they're able to rescue him in time, thankfully. But he permanently has a leg problem from it because of it. So they only managed to get 3 out of the 4 rabbits. It was a horrible thing. Injured. Hazel's doing really badly. And so on top of all of that, their ambassadors come back, and they're like, we got away with our lives. Barely. They're like, this is a terrible place. It's horrible. We never want to go back there ever again.
And then Hazel asks, but are there girls there? And they say yes. And so we have the second half of the book.
Literally, one of the sections is just Efra. I can't pronounce it. I can't even begin. Oh my gosh.
You know, he did design the language to sound as fluffy and rabbit-like as possible.
Yeah, the motions your mouth makes when saying bunny words feels like you're chewing on grass. It is making repeated circular motions. So I could totally see a rabbit sitting there going, Efra.
Yeah, or the names of tractors and cars, Hurdudu.
We got another linguist on our hands.
Yeah, he's definitely no Tolkien in that regard.
No, he's not created an entire language like you could actually talk in rabbit, but he goes way farther than you'd think he probably should.
Yeah, don't count on Lapine being on Duolingo anytime soon, folks.
No, but there is a glossary in the back.
A full 2-page glossary.
We had a conversation where we used the words and confused the other people in that group chat. And that's about where you can use the language. That's the level we're at. But yeah. So there's no other place. Kihar flies up, looks around. There's literally no other place. So they're like, okay, so we have to do this. And throughout the book, you get these stories about a trickster god, the rabbit trickster god.
How would you pronounce it?
Badly. El-Harayra.
I think it's Ella Rayra, but we can just call him Prince.
The Prince. That works. For our viewers at home, EL-AHRAIRAH.
The name Prince with 1,000 Enemies has lived rent-free in my head for almost a decade.
It's pretty good nickname.
It's such a cool name.
So we have that guy, and then we have a rabbit creator god, possibly the sun.
Lord Frith.
And then you got other characters in these. There's also Prince Rainbow.
Who probably isn't a rabbit. They just never describe what he looks like.
Yeah, and so I always imagine him as a rabbit, but they kind of make the distinction between your people and my people. So I don't know what Prince Rainbow is. I don't know if the rabbits know what it is, but we have Prince Rainbow. And then we have the freaking death god.
Yep, the Black Rabbit of Inle, or however you would say it.
Black Rabbit, and it is scary.
Yeah, it is the Grim Reaper of rabbit folk legends.
And they make him super scary, and then they try to backtrack a little, and they're like, oh, he's necessary. He only takes those that are at their time, and whatever. I'm like, you're kind of going both ways with this. He is both super creepy, super scary, and even smarter than the trickster god. But at the same time, you want to be like, oh no, he's one of us. He's good. Talk about both ways to look at death.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of has to be. You know, it fits the setting because rabbits live on a razor's edge their entire life. And so this whole black rabbit being able to be, you know, cannot be outsmarted or out-tricked and will always be there at the end, but is, in some form or fashion, a kindly creature. We humans, especially these days, are very separated from death. It's over there. Whereas rabbits, it's almost always in your face.
Yeah, it is a constant. Death is just around you. Not for our rabbits. They live to a ripe old age and then pass away. Hazel gets even more ripe than the rest of this.
An overripe Hazel.
Whatever that looks like. So yeah, there's our gods here that throughout the book you get different stories from them. And those are usually the longest chapters. But they decide, okay, we need to be as tricky as our rabbit prince. Whatever his name is. So they come up with a plan. And like I said, it takes them 2 whole days to think of this, which is the longest plan they have ever created. I consider it a month.
Yeah, I mean, if we live to 70 years and they live to 3, 2 days is a long long time.
It is a long time to be coming up with a plan. So mentally, I'm like, that's so quick. But in context, it makes sense. So they come up with a plan, and it involves Bigwig going undercover to be a part of this warren. So we get a lot of Bigwig coming up. Basically, for that whole section, it's Bigwig.
Yeah, Bigwig does kind of take the place of the main character.
Yes.
For a little bit. But I'll explain a little bit about Ephrata if I can.
Yes, go ahead.
This warren is kind of this super warren where the general has attacked other rabbit warrens in the area and brought the rabbits back as captives because he is super paranoid about humans and being discovered. And so he has this whole system where rabbits can only feed at certain times and they cannot pass waste wherever they want. They have to do it in a certain area. Only certain members are allowed to breed. You cannot go outside when you want. It's very regimental, controlled.
It is a very micromanaged.
Yep. And if you step out of line, Frith help you.
Like, they go nuts. It's bad. So you would think, logically, oh, they would be happy to get rid of overpopulations, but no, he is very not happy with this, bruh. Anyway, his micromanaging aside, and everyone being miserable for it, I'm shocked how quickly they accepted Bigwig.
Yeah, it kind of explains why, in that they were running out of male rabbits.
They literally lost 4 guards in the space of a couple of days, and they're like, well, crap, we're gonna have to scrape the bottom of the barrel to get someone else. And then Bigwig shows up and he's like, hey, I've already been in the military. And then immediately you're a guard. We have known you for 30 seconds. You are a guard.
Yep, this is manpower shortage.
He is so freaking suspicious of everything except for the obvious trap, but that's okay. It works out for us in the end. But I was just like, bruh.
Yep, because I mean, to him, who would suspect it of being a trap?
True. Who would dare tango with him?
Yeah.
Maybe have more than one interview when you're going to put someone in a position of power, but
rabbits have not yet discovered the second round interview. That's up there with floating.
More than one conversation about something, yes. So Bigwig is now a part of the guards.
Yep, they're Owsla.
And one of the things that happens while he's getting there, there's a fox. He sees the fox. He chases into the brush. He actually runs into a unit from this warren because they not only do they super police the area, they have these long routes where they actually travel for possibly days, which is ridiculous for rabbits. And they look at the area around. So he accidentally runs into them and then runs away because a fox is chasing him, and a fox gets one of them. And to be fair, because they do bring it up, and he's like, I told him to run.
Yep, and you know, it is kind of fortunate because he is the replacement for the person he helped kill.
Yeah.
It's kind of like causing a car accident and then walking into the guy's place.
Oh, gosh. Oh, no. So
he meets with the does.
He meets with some of the does of the warren, and wouldn't you know it, they recently made a petition to leave as well. And so they separated all the does into the different watches, and wouldn't you know it, the leaders just so happen to be in the one that Bigwig is assigned to.
And one of them is also a prophet, just like Fiver.
Which they did not get into as much as I wish they had. I have questions. They don't even end up together. Fiver ends up with another doe, which is kind of cute because he's like, oh my gosh, she's so pretty. And then they end up getting together. I'm like, oh, that's cute. But I kind of shipped these two and they end up not being together. But
you shipped in the middle of a book. That was your mistake.
Clearly.
Shipping down.
Oh, no.
But Bigwig meets the does, meets their leader, and meets a gossip, unfortunately.
I hate that rabbit. She is the worst. Okay, so they're basically like, we have to do this quickly because once word spreads, everyone's going to know this is our plan. So she goes back and talks to the does, and he's like, okay, we're going to be ready. And he kind of talks to the bird. They get creeped out and they end up having to redo things, but that's his job. And so as the does are leaving, I think the next feed, you have the two, and then you have this third one that's a gossip, and she's basically like, oh, Captain. There's another guy who's the captain. Oh, Captain, wouldn't it be terrible if does just like ran off? That would be so bad for you. How cringy. And walks off. This is my 2024 version of what she said. Summary. Truth in spirit, not in word. But yeah, she just like straight up gives up the game. And the captain's like, so I'm going to talk to the council about that.
Yeah, in the place where every single thing is suspicious except Bigwig joining. A doe saying, man, we're just going to leave. Might raise some eyebrows if rabbits had eyebrows.
She's the worst. I was so mad she did that. I was like, can we leave her behind?
And she did get left behind.
Did she?
Yeah, they captured her.
Oh, they did. They took her in. They were supposed to escape that day, but they ended up not, and they took her in, and she told the whole plan. She squealed.
Yep.
And they had to run. Bigwig deserves his title as second command. Yes, the trickster god was super tricky, but his second of command did most of the legwork in those stories and came up with some good plans. So I definitely see Bigwig he deserves that number 2 spot for sure. So he does a bunch of trickery and manages to get outside with the does, and they start running. They start going.
We forgot one character, and that is one that I actually came to enjoy. This, 11th hour character, Blackadder.
Oh, yeah. So he's a rabbit who tried to run away, and they mauled him.
Yep.
He is disfigured.
The son of an officer rabbit, very proud of it, but he didn't like how things were going, so he went with the does to say, hey, can we just go start another war and stop being overpopulated? And they said no, and so he just bolted anyway, and they tore the crap out of him. He was a broken rabbit. His spirit was dead, nothing but a small spark.
And the only reason they kept him alive was to be like, hey guys, if you run away, you're going to look like this. And so his job was to tell every single shift that, hey, don't do this. And everyone's like, yeah, as soon as he tells every single shift enough times, they're just going to kill him straight out. And so Bigwig just decides, like, I am not leaving this place without you. And so he has to overcomplicate things and think on the run, but he does manage to do it. He runs away with the does and this other rabbit. Good for Bigwig.
Yep, and they get discovered almost immediately.
Because, yeah, so many things against them, but they had to try. And thankfully, Woodward planned for a lot of things. He did not plan for a boat.
And he did not plan for a black-headed gull either.
Nope. So they go down the river and escape. And you're like, cool, they got away. And they managed to get back to Waterdeep.
With only 2 casualties, both of them does.
Yeah. Yeah, they got panicked. It was raining, first of all, so that's not great. But they got panicked because a bridge was coming off, and so they had to jump into the boat, and one of the does didn't do that fast enough, and so she got injured.
Yep.
And she doesn't end up making the night.
Yep. I will say, this is one of the great jailbreaks of fiction.
It's so good.
It really has your heart pumping at certain moments. Even in literature, that's hard to do because you're thinking, oh, did he get found out? Is this going down right now?
Yeah, and there's a lot of books where it's thriller or whatever, and you're like, oh, they're not going to kill the main character. A cozy mystery is a great one. Every cozy mystery ends with an attempt on the main character's life, and you want it to be there, but you know the main character's not going to die. It's like how I say with Disney movies. You know it's going to end well, but you're just curious how it gets there. This is not one of those cases. Author could have murdered anyone at any time.
If this was Star Trek, everyone's wearing a red shirt.
It is sketch.
Yep. So there is suspicion, there is intrigue, there is a bunch of tricks pulled out by Bigwig. There's just convenience happening by the, grace of Frith. And so it is fantastic. That whole last half of the book
is very good. And so we get to another part where we get back and we're like, okay, we have does. We're going to start having a society. We're going to be normal people now. Bold of you to assume Woodward was done with you.
Yep. Months pass. Some of the does are ready to have kids by now. They're thinking, okay, they're over there, we're over here. Kihar is gone by this time.
I think Clover ends up having her first litter. This is how much time has passed. Well, I mean, granted, they're bunnies, so not that much time, but they already have a litter of kittens.
I forget if she was just super ready to go.
She was pretty ready. When they were leaving to go the second time, there was word that Clover was ready, and they were like, oh no, how are the guys handling it? Because they thought they were going to kill each other to get the chance to breed, and they were like, oh, they managed to not kill each other, but maybe bring back women.
Yeah, I'm really thankful that he has times where he reminds us that they're rabbits, because otherwise this would be a really freaky book.
Yeah, that's why I mentioned the rape implied, because there's a moment where she's like, oh, you can get with whatever doe you want at any time, and Bigwig calls the head doe.
Yeah, the leaves and the breeze doe.
Calls her to make the plan, and she's nervous, and she's like, hey, I'm not in heat right now, we can't do this or whatever, and she's legitimately nervous. And there's another part later on where she's imagining this world, and she's like, we can actually breed with who we want to breed with. If you took that as humans, that would be way too far.
Yeah.
Which, granted, a lot of fantasy books do that because they're written by guys and whatever, but not the point. But yeah, so Woodward freaking has a siege of Watership down, and it is rough.
Yeah, they have 2 backup plans fall through.
Yeah, and they don't have Kahar anymore. They try to pretend, but they figure it out pretty quick that they don't have the bird anymore, and there's kittens in one burrow that they're trying to protect, and because they're like, oh, we could leave, and it's like, we have new kittens, try to get Clover to leave, there's no way. So, it's so scary.
Yep.
And they're clever and smart, but Woodward's clever and smart that got me way more than the escape attempt.
Yeah, Woodward is a force of nature. Just his sheer will, he can impose it on people around him.
He scares me.
Yep. My favorite part in the book, one of the scenes I remember most, is Bigwig is guarding
one of the tunnels.
Yeah, and so Bigwig is face to face with Woodward. Woodward, this undefeatable force of nature, and behind him is Bluebell and some of the does. And Bluebell is telling a story to these does to keep them calm as Bigwig and Woodward are ripping each other to shreds.
Yeah, and he manages, this is one of the things where it's like, trickery wins the day. He hides himself below the dirt because he's like, if he just comes in one-on-one fight, he's gonna win. So he hides himself in the dirt below so he's able to come up at him. And so, he did that. Thankfully gives him somewhat of an edge, but it literally is, I don't care whether I live or die, because even if I die, you're not getting around my dead body to get to the kittens and the does.
Yeah, just block the passage with your corpse kind of loyalty.
It's,
This is the funny part. This is where they learn that Bigwig is not the chief rabbit.
Yes, they assumed this whole time. He's big, he's strong. They're like, it has to be. And he's like, no, I'm loyal to my chief rabbit. And so all of them think their chief rabbit is insane. Must be bigger, must be stronger. Who could possibly rule over Bigwig?
Yeah, and all this time, they had met the chief rabbit before when Hazel came out, and he's this smallish, limping figure.
Yeah, he has a broken leg. How do you have a broken leg and you're ruling people?
I love that they did add that to him. Hazel is not this can-do-all kind of hero. He has a limp for the latter half of the novel.
There is a theme of trickery through the book. Being smarter gets you farther than military is basically. Think smarter, not harder. And yeah, that's what he does. That's how he leads, is he just knows a good plan when he hears it and is very clever in and of himself.
Yep. And so Woodward, for the first time, after burrowing down into the warren itself, after they blocked all of the exits, they just dug straight down into it. We're talking like SWAT team-esque break through the windows kind of deal. Woodward loses against Bigwig. And this is humongous for all of the rabbits that have been with him since the beginning.
Yeah. And then I'm trying to remember who has the idea about the dog.
It was definitely Hazel.
So Hazel's like, we need trickery. We can't just beat these guys. And so while that's going on, and they have the trickery about hiding in the thing and having a bunch of tunnels, and of course they have that big room to begin with that they weren't expecting. And so Hazel goes with some of the other buddies and is like, we need the dog. And they're like, excuse me, what? And so not only do they need the dog, they need to chew through the dog's rope. So they have to get real close to the dog, chew through the rope, and then have the dog chase them. Be fast enough to not get got, but be slow enough that the dog doesn't lose interest and lead them all the way back to the warren.
This is like a human unleashing a lion on its enemies or something.
It's big. It's nuts. And it does help a lot.
Yep. And it goes to show it's Woundwort taken to Woundwort's natural conclusion because they release this dog, Hazel does, and the dog follows Blackberry and Dandelion, was it?
I think it was Speedwell and Dandelion because they're the fastest.
But they lead the rabbits back to the Warren siege. The dog manages to nick one or two of the Ephrafa rabbits, and then it goes to Woundwort. And Woundwort attacks the dog.
He refuses to back down. He decides that today is the day that a dog will fear a rabbit.
I think his last words are even something to the effect of, "Get back here, you cowards. Dogs aren't even scary," or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you have the haunting aspect of his body was never found.
Yeah, that's how it ends.
Yep, the siege anyway. Hazel has a different ending.
True. I do love that. So each of them have a title name and they're pretty adept to it. But I love that there's a title that is just Dea Ex Machina.
Yep.
And what happens is Hazel gets injured again while releasing the dog, and then a cat is about to kill him. And then Lucy, this little farm girl, hears it and goes out and saves Hazel. Literally, the chapter is Deus Ex Machina. She wants to save it. The dad's like, kill it. And she's like, no. And she talks to this Dr. Adams or whatever. We get this whole beach episode about this little farm family.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because it's like you're at this ground level with rabbits. You're in their world, you're with their language, you know their customs and their cultures.
And then it's like, hey, remember that you're a human?
Yeah, you're looking through human eyes again at this wounded rabbit.
And not just anyone's eyes, the little girls.
Yeah, the little girl and the doctor, and they decide, she wants to show off to the doctor. She wants to bring him something. So she shows him the rabbit, and the doctor says, yeah, the rabbit's wounded, but it will be fine.
Yeah, and because she wants to keep it at first, and he's like, it's a wild rabbit. You cannot keep a wild rabbit. That would break its spirit more than anything else. And so they drive in the car, go a little ways, and release him. And so he is able to come back to his, what is this, the third time? It's at least the second time he has come back from the farm where everyone thought he was dead, and he just comes along the horizon.
Yep, and that actually does have a parallel to Woundwort, if we remember. Woundwort was also, in his backstory, adopted by humans for a bit before he ran away.
We have the two sides. And I talk about this often. I haven't talked about it to you, so here it is. The theory of power, there is two reasons to want power, and I think it kind of shows itself. There is one person who wants power for themselves. And I think that's how we have Woundwort. He is micromanaging every tiny detail of this Warren, sure, for their good, quote unquote, but also he's a control freak and he wants to have the power. He wants to have the power over more people. Even despite having a good-sized Warren, he goes out and fights other Warrens to get prisoners to come back. He wants the power for himself. Versus Hazel, who has the second type, which is I want power to help people. This is your folk heroes, which is what Hazel is. He is of the rabbits. There's nothing special about him. He wasn't born chosen. There's nothing especially good about it either. He's not overly intelligent. He's not the one with the visions. He's medium size, not the best in a fight. Everyone else seems to be faster, smarter, more charismatic.
He's not as big as Bigwig. He's not as smart as Blackberry. He's not a prophet like Fiver.
But he's the one that comes to power because he takes the power and turns it back to his rabbits. He is giving them a better life because he is in charge.
Yep.
And not just a fleeting power fantasy. So I do like that. That's why I like Hazel so much. He is a good example of what a real leader does.
Yep. I do like the fact that he's not perfect, that he does make mistakes.
Yes.
And, when he does get bold, he does get punished for it.
Yeah, even in the epilogue, it's like, and he forever had something wrong with his leg because he was shot.
Yep.
Isn't that life? We all get scars from something or other, some worse than others. But yeah, we definitely learn from our mistakes. And sometimes they stay with us for the rest of your life. Because there's so many times they get super injured and then the next day they're fine.
And it does make sure he has to rely on other rabbits.
Yes. And it's not, oh, I can just do everything like Odysseus, where it's like, oh, well, all my other men died, but sucks for them, not for me. I'm going to go home to my wife.
I've had enough of this. I'm going to go home to my wife.
biased. I hate the Odyssey, but that's beside the point. So yeah, I love that. And so his reward for all this is he gets to live a longer life to see how the Warren flourishes because of what they did. They even create another Warren in between Watership Down and Efferfra. And that's kind of where Strawberry ends up going. And I'm like, yeah, you're not really important to the Warren. Just off you pop.
Yeah.
Go start a new one. And so it's really good. Kihar comes back and spends time with them.
We understated his friendship to Bigwig.
It's so cute. They are the last two you would put together, and it is such a pure friendship.
Yeah. They talk to each other. Bigwig helps him get worms and all that. They just have fun talking to each other.
And Bigwig is fascinated by his culture. Kihar is fascinated by rabbit culture. It's so good. We got some cultural appreciation up in here.
Yep.
So the epilogue, Hazel lives many years. They create the Halfway Warren and it's a success. Woodwort lives on in the legend.
Yeah, I have the quote. And there endured the legend that somewhere out over the down there lived a great and solitary rabbit, a giant who drove the enemies like a mice and sometimes went to Silflay, which is eat outside in the sky. If ever a great danger arose, he would come back to fight for those who honored his name.
He literally becomes the cousin of the Black Rabbit himself.
And the mother rabbits would tell their kittens that if they did not do as they're told, the general would get them. The general who was first cousin to the Black Rabbit.
I love that because it really shows how truth and reality can become lore. Because what are humans if not for our mythology?
Yeah, and this is all folktales, with nothing written down. It's just memory.
Yes, it is an oral traditions passed down as you go. And so you see how real life has spawned this boogeyman and how it is carried down through the generations. And it's so good. I appreciate that. I like mythology. I'm a huge fan. So of course I'm like, yes. Because this could be considered a fantasy, but I would call it a fairy tale. Which is pretty impressive because it was 1972 and we weren't really writing a lot of fairy tales at that point. But I consider this a fairy tale and it is very good and I like it a lot.
And speaking of mythology, Hazel also listens to stories being told by one of the does to their kittens. And he can't remember if that was him doing the story or if that was the trickster prince.
He also gets old. A little bit that, I wonder, but yeah, no, it all becomes mixed up. And so maybe some of those stories that you look at what Dandelion was saying, maybe those stories had some truth in it. And then it has just been spun into this mythology, which once again is super interesting to me. That is where my mythology love comes in. It's like, how do people connect truth and then create these things and how it's passed on through the generations? So this hits a very sweet spot for me and I love it. And the book ends with Hazel not passing away, but joining the trickster prince's military. He becomes one of his soldiers.
Yeah, he joins the Ausla of El Herrera. And it is kind of funny because it's like he leaves behind his body. He did not feel he would need it anymore. And so it is this ascension.
Yeah, he does not die. He's basically translated into the next life.
Yep, and that's the story from top to finish.
That is the story. So this is what I would call something with not a lot of plot, but a lot of story. Because like I said, it is 400 pages. If I were just to do a bare bones outline of the plot, we'd get through it real fast. But there's so much story. There's so much nature description. There's so much mythology within it. Because every once in a while, we're getting stories about the trickster prince and what he's up to.
And there's the interactions between the characters themselves.
Yeah. And you will never forget that rabbit Silflay.
Yeah.
We do not miss a meal in this. And Grant, it's good because it adds to it because there's literally a book we've done for the podcast that included every meal and I hated it. But it adds to reminding you that we are rabbits. You are identifying with a rabbit. You have to get into rabbit mind. And that's what they think about is food, pooping, and going to bed. Sometimes mating.
Yeah, mating is a big part of this.
It's a big part, but also not a big part because they make it so long. But granted, like I said, this is like 2 weeks, maybe. And then the siege happens, which is like a month later. But It's good. General thoughts, I don't know, it's good. I've said all the things I want to say. It's good. Read it. There are my thoughts. There they be.
I would say I really enjoyed this book. If you like a lot of the classics, and I mean stuff like the Aeneid, the Odyssey, stuff like the ancient great poets and all of that, you will definitely enjoy this. He definitely takes a lot from all the classical sources. And so this story for me, it's almost like I've heard it before. Even if you're reading it for the first time, a lot of it will sound familiar, but it's like a bedtime story that you hear. And every time you hear it, it gets a little bit different because the first time they said it, they already forgot. But that's what makes it just so magical, is how similar it is to other stories.
And even if you're not into the Iliad and the Odyssey and other examples, I love Homer, but not the Odyssey. Mythology, yes, but even if you just like fairy tales, like you liked Aesop's Fables, if you like books about animals, it's very good. And like I said, I would equate it to The Wizard of Oz, which came out in the year 1900. So this is 70 years later, but I would equate that kind of adventure and fantasy. And granted, Wizard of Oz is much shorter. There are 13 books, though, so you can make up for it, but it's good. 2 thumbs up.
Yep.
One question for the author. I want to know how he picked names. Both of them. Both the rabbit names. And then also how he picked, this one's called Hazel. And this random, I literally have names for rabbits where I'm just like, the description of them is random rabbit that just got mentioned. And I'm just like, how did you decide that we're going to give this random rabbit the name of Nightshade or Pimpernel? There's a rabbit called Nose in the Air, and that's probably a flower. I did not look at that nose. It is a flower. Okay, confirmed. How? How did we pick those names?
Probably a biology book.
Did you just go down the list? This is the 70s. When did D&D come out? When did the D20 get invented? Welcome to my random Google trips. Oh, the D20 was surprisingly both the Egyptians and the Romans knew of. Like, it was made in 300 BC to 200 AD, somewhere in there. But they for sure had it by 200 AD. So it's about 2,000 years old. That's crazy.
Yeah, there were actual dungeons back there, and probably actual dragons.
When were dragons invented?
That is a rabbit hole that we shouldn't go down to.
I'm curious what Google would say. Okay, so they were in the Epic of Creation in Mesopotamia. So the late 2nd millennium, fun fact, that's the first time that dragons have been appeared. I know you were not expecting that coming into this episode, but you're welcome. So did he have a list and he'd cast die and whatever it landed on was who he was going to pick? Because I cannot think how he, first of all, had this many plants. I think you're right. He had a biology book. Does he randomly open to a page of his biology book and the first word he sees? How?
It did say in his biography that he spent a lot of time outdoors as a youth. And so he probably just picked names where it's like, here's a plant that grows in the English countryside of this part of England. And if a rabbit saw that, it would name its child that. And he just went down the list of plant names that he knew that rabbits might enjoy or fear.
The first one that popped into his head.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious. But he has passed away, so we cannot ask that question, and it's very sad.
My question would be, why didn't you do more with this? You wrote Watership Down in 1972. Tales from Watership Down, the sequel, 20 years later in 92. And then his death was in 2016. But for the splash that this book has made, he didn't really do more than that. And maybe sometimes you don't need to do more with it. It's fine as is. But for everything that's been done afterwards, the original author really only made 2 books, and he was perfectly satisfied with that.
Yeah, so I'm going to chalk it up to a skill that a lot of people don't have. It's very, very hard to develop. Just knowing when the story's done and sticking to that. I think I would rather him have done this book, and I guess the sequel, maybe we'll get to that, but I would have rather him do it and it be good than him drag it out until it's not good anymore.
And I don't mean The Adventures of Hazel, Part 3, Hazel's Revenge.
Okay, now I kind of want Hazel's Revenge, but keep going.
This format of this rabbit world, this rabbit universe and culture and language. Tales from Watership Down may be all that he could have done with it, now that I think about it, but it just seems like such an interesting world to create and then leave behind.
Let's see. What was it called? Bunnies and Burrows?
Yeah.
When did that come out?
It had a re-release recently, but I think it came out right around when the original D&D was made.
1976. So that makes me happy. I am very happy he lived, very quickly, to see this become a tabletop role play.
Yeah, and what, only 4 years after this came out?
They published a second edition in 1982, and then they revised a third edition in 2019.
I'm telling you, this thing has reach.
It does. It's very good. Yeah, it came out only 2 years after the first role-playing game, Dungeons & Dragons, was published. These guys were ahead of the game. Wizard of Oz just got a tabletop role-play book, which I got for my birthday last year, and I love it. So these guys were ahead. This fandom has been here for it. For sure. Rating. I would give this watching a nature documentary out of 10, because going back to, and a little to talk about your question, I did have that friend that gave it 3 stars and was like, how do you write this much story about bunnies? And so that might have been his problem. How do you write this much about bunnies? But if you're into it, you're really into it. I remember in college, we would go to this Mexican restaurant, and for whatever reason, they always had muted nature documentaries, and me and my friends would just be sitting there and coming up with the commentary as we went, just enjoying these movies. And then shortly after it, Snoop Dogg came out with those clips of him narrating nature documentaries. And so that's how I feel. If you're into it, you're gonna love this. If you're not, go away. Go watch something else. Go watch football. I don't know, whatever you watch. Bridgerton, whatever it be. But let us enjoy this, because we are going to enjoy it a lot.
I would give it a he heard it from the rabbits themselves out of 10.
A rabbit speaks to you out of 10.
Absolutely. It even kind of said at the end of the book itself, this is stories that rabbits would tell other rabbits.
Oh, for sure.
And so I really enjoyed it. I would definitely read it again after some time has passed.
Who are the Avengers of rabbits?
Also, I did not know this at the time, but I learned it. American rabbits and European rabbits are very different.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. European rabbits are the ones that build warrens. American rabbits are solitary.
Really?
Yep.
I thought that they were companion animals for some reason, like guinea pigs.
Nope. European rabbits are actually imported for use as domestic rabbits.
We like theirs better.
Yeah.
Because they create warrens. That makes sense.
Yep. They're more cuddly, I suppose.
More social.
Yep. And also, I did not know about this. You remember in the book they talked about the white blindness?
Yeah, vaguely, yes.
It was one of the things Woundwort was paranoid about.
Yeah, they mention it several times like it's a disease you can get.
Yep, it's real.
Oh, I totally believe it's real.
Yep, listen to this, right?
Oh, dear.
This white blindness that he talked about, by the time he wrote it, and some years after that, that same disease had wiped out 95% and more of European rabbits.
Jeez.
Yep, we're talking a near rabbit extinction event.
What did they do? Did they find a cure for it? Or did they just, the ones that lived?
This was a meteor event for rabbits. You could not vaccinate them against this.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. It was an American rabbit disease that they kind of got over.
Brought over. Oh, that's why.
Some guy decided that he didn't like rabbits digging up his yard, so he infected a few rabbits and then set them loose.
Bruh.
Yeah, this is genetic engineering at its absolute worst.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the amount of devastation this caused is hard to understate. And the fact that it's mentioned in the novel as kind of this background thing is kind of amazing.
Jeez.
They're making a comeback now because you know rabbits, but imagine 95% of people that you know gone.
Imagine the Black Plague, but worse.
Yeah, even the plague maybe wiped out a third of Europe, but 90% and more. So Hazel brought his crew through the crucible.
Really, though? Oh my gosh. Good they made it to Watership down.
Yep, and there is a whole lot we couldn't even touch on. Just these little minutia points that make the book that much better.
Oh yeah, there's just tiny conversations between the rabbits and personalities, and it's so much. You just read it for yourself. Highly recommend. Speaking of, read again. Yes, I would. I have already told my husband I have the desire to look for a nice copy. I have a nice copy of The Wizard of Oz. It feels appropriate. And I am going to read this to my child. I think he would like it a lot. He likes rabbits. His favorite stuffed animals are rabbits. He has chosen that for himself. So I think he'll like this book a lot.
Yep, and I will say I will reread again at some point. I do want to get into like the cartoons and all that.
I had enough just from the clips. Although they did have another movie of Watership Down with CGI 3D rabbits.
Yeah, I saw that. I thought it was like a Netflix series.
I would have to look it up again, but I saw that and I'm like, that might be where our uncanny valley for rabbits is. A little concerning, but it is what it is. But have you read this book? Would you play this as a tabletop RPG? Do you have any book recommendations for us? Tell us all about it in the comments below. If you like the video, hit like, and if you're enjoying yourself, hit subscribe for more. Thank you for exploring Watership Down with us. Join us next time when we'll be covering Mirror's Edge by Scott Westerfeld. I'm Sam Reiner.
And I'm Tim Bergman.
And we hope to see you and a friend here next time. Escape With Me Book Club is a Lunar Skulk production. Check us out on TikTok or Instagram to keep up to date with us. Lunar_SKULK.